Hello, everybody. I'm Jesse Waters, along with Dr. Nicole Saphier, Juan Williams, Dana Perino, and Greg Gutfeld. It's 5 o'clock in New York City, and this is The Five. A major Senate showdown over if America will hear from both Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh and his accuser. Senate Republicans setting a hearing for next Monday, but Democrats are making new demands. They now want more time, more witnesses to testify, and for the FBI to investigate the 36-year-old allegation. President Trump reacting to it all earlier.
You don't wait till the hearing is over and then all of a sudden bring it up. When Senator Feinstein sat with Judge Kavanaugh for a long period of time, a long meeting, she had this letter. Why didn't she bring it up? Why didn't she bring it up then? Why didn't the Democrats bring it up then? Because they obstruct and because they resist. That's the name of their campaign against me. They're lousy on policy, and in many ways they're lousy politicians, but they're very good on obstruction. We should go through a process because there shouldn't even be a little doubt.
And lawmakers are trading blows over how this process is playing out.
It is still disturbing, however, to think about the way in which this is developed right at the end. And it's pretty obvious this is all about delaying the process.
We cannot continue the victimization and the smearing of someone like Dr. Ford. And you know what? She is under no obligation to participate.
We wouldn't find ourselves, nor would Dr. Ford find herself in this situation if Senator Feinstein hadn't sat on this letter she's had since July.
I think the nomination should be withdrawn. He has raised serious doubts about his credibility.
While so far Republicans say lawyers for Christine Blasey Ford have not responded to their invitation for her to testify. And Mark Judge, the other person alleged to be in the room, says he doesn't remember the incident or the party and will not testify. Okay, so before we get into the political stuff, I want to ask the doctor a question, and Dr. Gutfeld brought this up yesterday about the memory situation. So tell me what you think about this as a licensed professional. She doesn't really recall how she got to the party. She doesn't recall the house that the party was thrown in, and she doesn't recall how she got home from the party. She's a little fuzzy about the people that were there at the time, and there was some discrepancy with the notes that her therapist took. And she admits that she was drinking. Now, with that said, she believes, and I believe she believes, that something happened that night. But what role does memory play in the passage of time with an allegation this serious?
It's a great question, and let's be clear, I'm not a psychologist, psychiatrist, or involved in this case whatsoever. That's my medical disclaimer. However, it is a well-known fact that people, when something traumatic happens to them or something that happens a long time ago, like when you're in your doctor's room and they deliver some news, that the moment you leave, you don't necessarily remember the details, you don't remember the facts. Add a not fully formed frontal lobe, add alcohol, and then add 36 years to that, and obviously, details can get muddied a little bit. Do I believe something happened to Dr. Ford in her adolescence? Absolutely. I don't think anybody's ready to deny that whatsoever. But I do think it's interesting that the party of Bill Clinton and Keith Ellison are trying to lecture America that we need to have a potentially politically motivated allegation should derail an entire process here. And I have concerns about that because we want to ask questions, get answers, but she doesn't have the answers. And so it's going to go into a he said, she said.
Well, here's the problem, though. So she said she can't remember some of the details that Jesse rightly laid out. But he says of a party that nobody remembers the details, that he wasn't there. Well, that's not logical. Wait a second. So nobody knows exactly where the party took place, and you don't remember being there. Well, how can you wait? That didn't make sense.
But Juan, that's the trick, and it's you can't blame if you say you did this to me. I can't tell you when or where, because then if I do, you might be able to say I wasn't there and that wasn't me. So you leave that intentionally vague.
No,
right?
I would say that never happened.
Mm-hmm. But he did say that.
No, but he also said I wasn't there. That was the problem in my mind.
Well, that's why he knows he wasn't there, because it didn't happen.
But I would say that the other point is that, you know, having watched this before in my life, I just think it's proper to say that it's very difficult, given what Dr. Singer was saying about memory. very difficult for people who have been traumatized and hurt then to come forward in the first place and know they're going to be pilloried. That
Right.
she's in the arena right now. You
Big
could
time.
not be more at the mountaintop with arrows flying from every direction.
But there's a difference between skepticism and pilloried. Everybody has if everybody can go on social media and condemn something, people can go on social media and question something. And I think that, like, even like Senator Blumenthal, he should know better about the fallibility of memory. This is a guy who, sincerely, I will give him that, believed he went to Vietnam, but he actually didn't go. We change our memories. I said it yesterday. Our memory is Play-Doh. But I will say this, to your point, that goes both ways. Her memory has gaps, and so could his.
Right.
So,
Yeah,
so that's why something has to be reported when it happens. This is the problem. You can't relying on something that happened 3.5 decades ago in the court of public opinion means every single human being on this planet is vulnerable to this thing.
And the Democrats, Dana, said they want the FBI to go back and investigate this. But the FBI has said this isn't really something we do. This is something a local law enforcement would do. What's the play here next?
Well, if you want to learn a little bit more about the FBI piece, Kim Strassel, the Wall Street Journal, had a series of tweets today explaining the FBI's jurisdiction, its role, and how it does background checks. There's been 6 of them on Brett Kavanaugh in the last 15 years.
6.
Not ever come up before. This is not a jurisdictional issue for them. It would have been local law enforcement. The Democrats are saying the FBI needs to reopen it. And the FBI is like, well, what would we do? So now you have a situation where the senators have said on the Republican side, we'll have another hearing. We'll do it Monday. We'll do it quickly because Brett Kavanaugh says, I'm anxious to clear my name. They still haven't heard from Dr. Ford's lawyers or from her as to whether she will show. The senators also said, you don't have to do it in open hearing. We can do it as a closed session. So you won't have to worry about this idea that you're going to be paraded around and there will be some kind of a circus. And I am curious about one thing. Senator Hirono, the Democrat from Hawaii, she said that Dr. Ford is under no obligation to prove anything. She doesn't have to say anything. Well, then why then is the burden of proof on Brett Kavanaugh? And if it is on him, then let him testify. And if she doesn't come, I think that they do what they can to try to get the information. And if the Democrats decide that they're going to vote against him, which they already said they were going to, call the vote.
Well, Orrin Hatch says he doesn't believe her. I mean, I think that's premature. But I do think that in most cases like this, and so let's try to step away from the politics for a second. If there was such an incident, an assault, typically you would have somebody from the local police, special victims, go in there and try to figure out what actually took place.
Right.
So in this situation, I think it cries out, given all the political static in the air, for somebody to say, here's what we were able to discern by talking to people, It just hasn't
that's
happened.
what a hearing, closed or open,
Oh,
or
no, I
both
meant
of
the
them
FBI.
testify.
I meant like some law enforcement people.
But what
away
would they
from
say 36 years ago?
I don't
Who would
know.
they speak
Nobody knows
to
where the party
besides
was,
the
or
two
even- they
people
don't even
that
know
were
the year.
allegedly there?
They don't even know the year that the party was supposed
Oh,
to
I thought
held.
they did know the year because she was 15 and he was 17.
No, they're iffy on the year.
But it's if it was a local law enforcement issue, the statute of limitations have way expired. So I don't even think you could even prosecute a crime if there were a crime in this part.
But it's not about prosecution.
Right, but I'm saying if you were to even look at it
But
in that way.
this will set a guilty until proven innocent precedent if this successfully derails the nomination.
That's why she says that when Senator Hirono says that the accuser is under no obligation, and we are to just, okay, then what are we supposed to do? Just to say, okay, well, there's an accusation with that something happened, but we don't know all of these details, and therefore,
Well, this is exactly what
no
the
one's allowed
Democrats
to ever
want,
go forward.
because you can't prove or disprove it. It's just out there now, and it's out
and
there
Jonathan
for the
Turley
American minds.
said that the tie goes to the accuser. So if it's he said, she said, that the tie goes to the
Wasn't the
accuser.
only
Is
one.
that
Yeah.
is that the new standard?
This is there's a certain kind of public display going on where people are saying that if it's he said, she said, it must always be she said. If that's the case, then we don't really need to have courts anymore. We can just do a priority of innocence on what group is more innocent than the other and get rid of courts. This is about winning for a party at any cost, and the cost is perhaps ruining a life. I saw a headline, I won't say where it's from, that said the headline was this: Are Republicans really going to nominate an accused rapist to overturn Roe?
Right.
Okay, so think about, I would ask the people on both sides, imagine if this was your son, dad, or brother. We often think about, victims, but would you characterize this as fair with the knowledge that we have right now? Is it fair to characterize somebody that way if that is your husband, your brother, your son, or your father? And I think sometimes, well, all the time in politics, we don't think that way, and we will ruin somebody's life just so we can get somebody on the court.
In the Me Too era, this has become a little bit more common than we've seen in the past.
Yeah, I was going to say, I agree with you that, to me, though, the thing about it is, historically, women say, men, you don't get it, you don't hear us, you don't listen to us, right?
That's true.
And then you get this cultural surge. I saw it with Anita Hill, and I'm seeing it again now. It's a different era. But it's, again, do we as men listen? Do we hear? And it's very difficult because this is about culture. You said it was just about one side winning. I think, by the way, you could reverse it, that Republicans just want to get this out of the way and have their majority.
But how can you hear if they're not willing to come and talk?
Well, that's the question. Right. You raised an important point today. Is she willing to testify? We thought she was. Now her attorney won't say.
And also, we just because you're skeptical does not mean you're not listening.
Right.
You may be really listening.
Right.
We're listening as much as possible, because I said this before. I believe something happened, but I believe memory is having an effect either with him or with her.
Well, the
It's
whole
not
world
misogynistic to
is going to be
question it.
listening on Monday because it's going to be one for the history books. President Trump saying what we call the witch hunt will be exposed by declassifying key Russia documents. You'll hear from him personally next.
Well, all right. Dr. Funkenstein. Yeah.
I want total transparency. This is a witch hunt. Republicans are seeing it. The Democrats know it's a witch hunt, too, but they don't want to admit it because that's not good politics for them. But it's a terrible witch hunt, and it's hurt our country. And the things that have been found over the last couple of weeks about text messages back and forth are a disgrace to our nation.
President Trump defending his decision to declassify key FISA court documents and text messages connected to the Russia probe. The move is being praised by the president's allies, but Democrats say it could create national security risk.
It's laughable that they're saying this is going to somehow endanger national security. You've heard me say this and many others say this. This is really full transparency for the American people.
In the process, important sources and important precedent of protecting those sources may be violated by this president who cares little about the national security.
So that you know, it's not clear to us yet when exactly these documents will be released or how they will be released. But released, apparently they will be, Dana.
Yep. And there's this is something that the president has the power to do. He can declassify anything at a moment's notice, but there is a responsible way to declassify things, and that is to have the process. As you can see behind us, there's on the big board there. There's if you need to protect somebody's identity that is not involved in this, that it should be protected, you can cross out their name and have it redacted. There's four basic areas that they're looking for. One would be the FISA court and what was used to go to the FISA court. Was it accurate? So you might find out more about it there. You also get to know about the renewal applications, because with FISA, every 90 days you have to go back and you have to prove to the court, I need this to continue because the activity I was concerned about, it is ongoing, so that's why it gets renewed. There's also the Page and Strzok text messages, or there's more where that came from, but I'm really interested in the piece about Bruce Orr. Bruce Orr was meeting with
Steele.
Excuse me, I can't remember Steele's first name. Christopher Steele, thank you, not the other one that used to be the RNC chairman. He was talking to, Bruce Orr was talking to Christopher Steele, who was decommissioned at that point. And so as I understand it, he was operating outside of his lane and meeting with somebody that the FBI had decommissioned. Now, why would you do that? Is that inappropriate? And he has his own investigation ongoing. Remember also that in the midst of all of this, there is a Department of Justice Inspector General report that is ongoing that will answer a lot of these questions. So in some ways, the president is, I understand he's champing at the bit. He wants to get this out there. He wants to clear his name. This is getting a little bit ahead of that process. The Democrats are complaining it's not complete and that it could be dangerous. But I think that the FBI and DOJ will be very careful about protecting people's identity.
So, Jesse, what you're hearing from people like Mark Warner, Senate Intelligence Committee, a Democrat, is that the president is essentially using his power to pursue a political vendetta against this Russia probe and Robert Mueller and the intelligence agency?
I mean, I think he's counteracting a political vendetta against himself and his campaign. And I just want to take a moment. Dana Perino, that was such an articulate and thoughtful analysis of the deep state. And usually, I can kind of hear you rolling your eyes when I get into the Nellie Orr and the Bruce Orr and the Steele. But what a great synopsis.
Well, I think
finally come around.
You can actually be thoughtful and not have to resort to name calling of all of the civil service as the deep state.
Okay, well, I'll start calling some names then. Look, this was a big abuse of power. And
what?
The fact that they spied unconstitutionally on an American, and then this narrative gets out. This narrative gets out that there was this big collusion, and now you have a special counsel. It's incredibly frustrating. What they did was they paid a guy to go to anonymous Russian intelligence sources and whisper things into Steele, and then he gives it to Bruce Orr, and then it trickles up, and then they all of a sudden slap a FISA warrant on an innocent American and listen to his phone calls and look at his emails for 1 full year. And at the end of the year, there has never been a charge levied against Carter Page. They found nothing. And they have been trying to cover their tracks for this last year and a half because they know this never would have come out if Hillary Clinton were elected. That was the game plan. They should have given the Trump campaign, if they really cared about Russian interference, a defensive briefing in the spring. But instead, they threw spies at them. A lot of these spies were Western intelligence officials, Hillary Clinton-connected donors. The whole thing reeks. And I'm happy the president's being transparent about it. I just feel bad for the IG. He really wanted his report to get out there beforehand.
Before Hurricane Dana blows over this way, I want to go to you, Doc.
I'm all smiles.
Your smiles now. Good. Doctor, so Peter King, a congressman from New York, says that the president here wants to reveal that there was no basis for the FISA warrant itself, no basis at all. And I'm thinking to myself, so now you're going after the FISA judges because the judges approve this repeatedly. Right. What do you think?
So as the average American is going to agree with me because, I am not a political pundit or an expert in any of this. But what I see here, kind of from a bird's eye view, is that there is concern over, as Jesse was saying, spying on an American, Carter Page specifically. That is something I have a concern about because I want to know, was it just political opposition motivation that has caused our DOJ to spy on Americans? I'm also concerned with the text messages where the one that said it's like an insurance policy in the unlikely event you die before you're 40, talking about if Trump were to gain presidency. As an average American, I want to know what they're talking about. Is there some behind the scenes move to undermine our current administration? And I'm not going to be able to do much if these FISA documents are released. I will look at them and hand them over to Dana Perino, and then she's going to interpret them and tell me what they mean. But that's what it is. At least I know that there's going to be some transparency. I don't think that we're going to be putting America in danger. I think they will keep names and anything that really needs to remain classified.
So now we go to an above average American, Greg Gutfeld.
Thank you. Not by height. Wouldn't it be awesome if we found out after all this stuff was released that Carter Page actually was like a super awesome, deadly assassin with like the most dangerous, because like he's such a dork. I know him. He's a nice guy, but it's just so. What would happen if it turned out he really, really was dangerous? But it's not, and it's kind of unfair. How long can you spy on somebody without charging them? It's a good question, and this has to be the first time in my life that I've seen journalists not wanting access to information. I mean, they used to love leaks and memos and national security be damned. And now they're all of a sudden they're worried about, the danger. And to Trump's credit, he's the Pyrex POTUS. You could see right through him. This is a window pane White House. Most transparent president in the history of histories, from the past to the future. The press should love that. He's like your neighbor who never draws his curtains. Sometimes you wish. I have one of those. Yeah, I do too. Believe me. Sometimes you wish you would, but they,
I think I am one of those.
You probably are. Lastly, I want to change my name to Redacted. Wouldn't that be great?
I like it.
That'd be good.
From now on, I want to be known as Redacted.
Okay.
All right.
Doctor, you can do that.
So I gotta tell you, my
no,
worry.
we can't go. They're yelling at me as though I talk too much.
Well, anyway, my worry about the Pyrex is that, when I put hot water in it, I think it's going to boil over and burn me. And I think that's a little bit of what's happening here with this revelation. A new study reveals the negative words most used by the media when covering President Trump. Gregory fills you in next on The Five.
This recycling tip is brought to you by...
Love that. It's true. The press thinks Donald Trump is stark raving mad. The Media Research Center counted the words reporters used to describe Trump and found he was angry 23 times, furious 17 times, outraged 8 times. He was also venting, infuriated, livid, erupting, lashing out on a tirade. The good news, no spontaneous combustion. That's for after the midterms. So why all this language? Well, it's to make you think the guy with the finger on that famous button is bonkers. Absent any harmful deeds by Trump and faced with booming optimism about America's direction, the media is like a pack of cats looking for a sack, out to create a story that fits their own infuriated, furious, eye-bulging narrative. So they traffic in workplace rumors, the stuff that exists in all offices since the beginning of cubicles. Heck, even Jesus dressed down his apostles. But we get it, Trump's no Jimmy Carter. Thank God. I mean, who'd you rather have, a nice guy mocked by the world or a loudmouth who keeps the world guessing and therefore cooperating? Now, Trump's bombastic, but most bosses are. They use their voice like an instrument as a call to action to wake up the slackers, to get the team to do actual work. That voice isn't there to soothe the concerned or troubled souls in the media. And it's always about the media. They're like ignored teens. And they just hate the new guy who's making them work for their shrinks and drinks. They need someone who makes them feel important by echoing their phony virtues. After Obama, the media got so flabby, they should thank Trump. He's the one who put them on the press room diet, where they eat nothing but their own words. Anyway.
Clever.
That's pretty funny.
Very nice.
Well, let's just go to break.
Okay.
I'm kidding. I'm joking. Dana, you made this point earlier, that when they talk about when President Obama would get mad, they describe him as fiery.
But it was always a compliment.
Good thing.
But
Yep.
it was fiery as a compliment. So
Yes.
the thing is with President Trump, he's not boring.
Yes.
Okay. And in the media, you have to figure out a way to make something interesting, exciting. You got to figure out why would somebody click on that? Why would somebody buy that? So with President Trump, they use all the ones that they used. For President Obama, if he was fiery, that was like a good thing because he was finally going to get out there and he's going to show those Republicans. If he was frustrated, that was because Republicans were obstructionists.
Yeah.
Okay. And if he was the worst they ever said about him is that he was testy or he was irritated.
Yes.
That was and those things were like that was like the worst they ever said about him.
Well, actually, the birth certificate thing was pretty bad. Jesse, this is my favorite.
I never said anything about the
This is my favorite.
Either.
I know, it was just a joke. I was making.
It took me a minute to get it. I'm sorry.
All right. They said the president lashing out. He was lashing out 53 times over 6 months. Lashing out. That's almost. I can't do math, but a lot.
Yeah, that's a lot. I mean, listen, if the media was calling me a racist, mentally ill colluder, and they were raiding my lawyers' offices, I'd be lashing out a lot too. But I don't really believe it because I don't think these networks have the type of sources that would actually tell you what the president's mindset is in that inner sanctum in the Oval Office. I remember I don't, but I look back at when Bill Clinton was under investigation by a special counsel. The press called him resilient, energized, invigorated, strategizing, passionate. I mean, it's like it really tells you more the adjectives that they use about the media than about the person they're describing. For instance, the media calls me smarmy, sarcastic, all kinds of awful things. But if you look when nonpartisan, real fair and balanced media describe me, they say I'm handsome, insightful, funny. It really just depends on where it's coming
from. And but your mom actually said those other things.
That's my mom.
It's true. But it is true what Jesse's saying. One, if they followed me around, they could say that I yell constantly,
grumpy.
that I'm grumpy all the time, that I sing nonsense songs, and that I mutter to myself. These are all accurate descriptions.
All accurate.
That's all right.
Yes.
Yeah. They do a better job with you than they do with my man Jesse. I don't know why. It's not fair to Jesse. But I will say that to me, there are just too many sources here. So, like, even if you read conservative media, they say this president can be volatile and can be impulsive. He's unpredictable. So I don't know. to me, when you have him described as fire and fury or fear or unhinged, I think these are book titles.
Right.
Gee, there's a lot of people saying this. I don't know.
3 people.
Oh, 3 people. I see.
And many of them are liars. Lying liars. Liars, leakers, and liberals.
And flippers. They're flipping. I've dealt with those people. They're a bunch of crooks. Flippers.
Dr. Sapphire, is there something psychologically wrong with the press?
I love that I always get the psychological questions.
she's
as though
not
I'm
a psychiatrist.
You're not a psychiatrist. Okay. I have
the
a corn on my foot.
The problem I don't
I
do
do
that
actually.
either. The problem I have with this verbiage is it encourages single-minded certainty, and it really closes off all sorts of compromise. Ask anyone I work with, I'm even keel all day long until I'm faced with incompetency. And at that point, you start to see that I get upset. I'm not throwing tantrums, but you know I'm upset. The press called President Trump angry 185 times since January 1. Well, you know what? He deals with incompetency every day. Everything that he campaigned on, there are obstructionists in the way. Healthcare, the wall, we don't have all day. But he's frustrated, and that's why he's angry.
I think he would be, I think that he might like to be described differently, but if you weren't described in these ways, he wouldn't be actually getting done what he says he's getting done. So
fear helps.
Yeah, you know how I describe him?
Yes.
Stable genius.
Very.
All right. Up next.
Roseanne was canceled by herself, but picked up by white nationalists.
Oh. Jokes from the Emmy Awards are getting a lot of attention. The highlights next.
If it's meant to be, it'll be, it'll be. Baby, just let it be.
The 70th Primetime Emmy Awards were held in Hollywood last night. It didn't take long for the show to turn political. Here are some of the highlights that has everyone buzzing.
Roseanne was canceled by herself, but picked up by white nationalists. The Obamas now even have their own production deal at Netflix. And my dream is that the only thing they produce is their own version of The Apprentice.
That'd be nice.
And it gets way higher ratings.
My mother's not watching.
What?
Well, she said she doesn't like watching white award shows because you guys don't thank Jesus enough. That's true. The only white people that thank Jesus are Republicans and ex-crackheads.
All right, the show's ratings reportedly sinking to an all-time low, down 10% from last year. There is somebody at this table named Redacted who watched 90 Minutes?
Yes, I did.
Funny? Funny or not funny?
Well, I thought I don't see what the big. I thought it was a fairly benign show. For the first 90 minutes, we spent a lot of time for the last 3 years calling people snowflakes before, because they can't take words on campus. If you have a problem with this, then you are officially a snowflake. I actually think that the Michael Che joke was an insult at the Emmys, and not people think that because he mentioned Jesus, he was making fun of Christianity.
No.
He was doing the opposite. What he was saying is his mom doesn't watch white award shows because nobody there thanks Jesus. And what he was knocking was this group as a homogenous group who doesn't thank Jesus. And then he says the only people who thank Jesus are Republicans and ex-crackheads. And the joke, and maybe I got it wrong, but my interpretation is he's saying that you people out there do not thank Jesus. These people do. Republicans and people who just went through hell, who used religion to get out of a horrible addiction. Those are the only people. Now, of course, other people thank Jesus, but the joke was directed at that audience for being homogenous, liberal, and basically agnostic.
Now, did you watch it, Jesse?
No, I didn't. I read a book and I watched Hannity. And and then I listened to Limbaugh on the way in, and he actually had a really good point. Television right now has never been this good.
Yes.
There is such great quality television on Netflix and just everywhere that it's strange that when they have award shows about all these great TV shows, people change the channel or they don't watch, because I just think
there's
they
other
like
stuff.
watching. Yeah, that's a great point. But they like watching the shows. They don't like listening to the actors be political. And I agree with Greg. I thought some of those jokes were pretty funny. I would have delivered it a little bit differently, but I haven't been invited yet. One of these days. I'm waiting.
One of these days, Juan.
Oh, well, I didn't watch it, that's for sure, because I think I would rather watch the actual shows. And by the way,
You'd rather watch Hannity, I think, right?
You know, it's hard for me to.
Yes,
'cause
just say
getting,
yes.
Just say yes.
No, because I'm getting ready for Ingram. So I get the popcorn.
Okay, so then your book coming out.
I mean? Yeah. So what I was going to say to Greg was, I think that you're right, but I think that, you know, to my mind, he was saying like black people would be thanking Jesus.
That's what he's saying.
that's
That's
what he's
exactly
saying.
what he
So
was.
I don't know that, I think it was beyond that. I mean, I thought it really spoke to that idea of who it is that will do something as daring as acknowledge their faith in public.
You're exactly right. That's what I was trying to say.
I think that's what-
and
that's
it's
what
a
I'm
politically, actually a very politically incorrect thing to say, I think, on his part. And I thought it was
Right.
kind of brave.
It was a little risky.
It was a little risky, I thought.
What did you? I know you don't watch it, but do you like to watch any of these shows that got awards?
I really stopped watching award shows a couple of years ago because I'm not interested in watching these Hollywood people have so much influence over the public. I just don't need to hear what they have to say. I like the Grammys for the music. The moment they start speaking, it goes off. You know, a lot of these actors and entertainers, they're actually not educated, but they have this huge fan base, and so they just go off because they have this fan base. And I really appreciate intelligent conversation. So if you're not backing it up with education and facts, then I really have nothing.
You know what is a great award show?
What?
Country Music Awards. So that is a great show. Am I right, Allison?
I gotta tell you,
thanking Jesus on that.
A lot of people are criticizing this who didn't even watch it.
That's true.
And it's like, come on. It's like I actually watched it. This was the most benign. I'd say, like, if you can't handle a few jabs, what's your problem?
What is wrong with the 5 today? What is going on? You're supposed to attack the Hollywood elite.
I do that enough of that. I do that four times a week.
You're
Oh,
disappointed.
they're telling me we gotta go. Okay, a new study says there are only 4 personality types. Which category does the 5 fit in? We're gonna find out about Greg next.
You may have noticed the 5 hosts have a variety of personalities, but a new study now says we can narrow them down to just 4 types: average, reserved, self-centered, and role models. Good news, those can change over time, just in case you don't like the one we give you. All right, guys, so we have already known that there are 5 personality traits. Many people have taken this massive questionnaire throughout the course of their lifetime, and they have an idea of where they sit at. Now we have a new study out that has taken those traits and has narrowed people down into 4 main personality types. So I have carefully decided what I think you guys are. Again, not a psychologist. However, for the fun of the show and this study, so for me, I like average. Average tend to be, they're extroverted, but they're a little neurotic, meaning they have their emotional highs and lows. A lot of times people tend to grow out of that. So I think Dana, maybe when she was younger, definitely me, I was average when I was younger, but I have grown into role models, and I think Dana is a role model, which would mean that she is extroverted, openness, agreeable, conscientious, but she's not neurotic anymore. She's a little bit more even keel. Juan, I like Juan to be reserved. He's agreeable, conscientious, and he's also emotionally stable, and that's why I sit next to him. There's no outbursts.
You think he's
It's
emotionally
very
stable? That's
easy to be with. Greg and Jesse, you guys are tough. You guys are tough.
Careful, doctor.
I will tell you, I go back and forth between, for Greg, I like average, and I want to go a little bit self-centered. The only reason I say that is you're obviously extroverted. You're not necessarily agreeable, so that goes with self-centered. But I find you a little neurotic with your, a little bit. So therefore, you're between average and self-centered for me. And Jesse, only because it's been being told in my ear that you're self-centered over and over again by the little voice in the microphone. And
Yeah, the
your
producer
keeps
said that I was
telling me
self-centered in an endearing way.
You know what this is?
That's true.
Do you know what this is? This is like that astrology garbage. Do you know when you go and you see, like, you read your astrological sign, and it goes, oh, you're agreeable, yet you take risks. You're loving, yet you're reserved. And then you realize you read the wrong astrology sign, but you agreed with it. Because they use generic phrases so that you can say, hey, I'm reserved, but I'm also a role model.
That's what a Capricorn would say.
Dana, do you think by me giving you this and saying what I think you are, that would actually, change some of your behaviors or make you to kind of fit
Well, you
into
said
this
I was a
box?
role model, which, according to me, it was like pretty much the best thing you could be on here.
See what I mean?
When you start putting people in a box, so they do say that you can change, but like
Well,
if I put you in a box and you don't like it.
I don't think I'm as extroverted as some people think I am. And I think part of that I have learned, like from people here, especially just going from the government work to in television, that a lot of people are more energized when they go on television and they leave and they're energized, they're so excited. I'm kind of the opposite. I think it takes a lot for me to bring the energy to the show, and then I need to.
Tell me about it.
I know. I mean,
joking.
I know. No, but it's true. I do, and you've helped me with that.
Don't upset her. She's fragile.
No, she said I'm very even-keeled emotionally.
So my reserved one. So my emotionally stable reserve one. Do you think that people kind of jump into these different categories throughout the day during different life events, or do you think someone really is kind of born with characteristics and that's just how they stay?
Well, I think people have to adjust, and I think successful people manage it. So if you want to be a leader, I think even if you're an introvert, and I can be very introverted at times, I think you have to understand that when you're in a social group or when you're in a challenge, you have to step up. And so you teach yourself how to do it. So people who are successful at that, it may come across to some as they're extroverts, or what we have here is extraversion. But I think, in fact, they can be learned skills. By the way, I saw in the paper the other day an essay about who doesn't get into college in America. The most discriminated against group, introverts.
And they actually create some of the most.
Unfortunately, the artists and the thinkers. So it's kind of the creative class.
Yeah, sometimes I wish you were a little bit more introverted, Juan.
As I know. But you know what? I think of you as my rainbow, Jesse.
Oh, I'm your role model.
Yeah, you are my role model.
I know.
Because you're so pushy. Yeah.
So Jesse, sum it up for us. Do you think that we were accurately characterized with our personality traits, or do you think I was off a bit?
No, I think you nailed it, Doctor. I'm not going to second guess you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Dana's definitely a rule follower. And what was the other one? On time for appointments. You're probably early for appointments.
Always. If you're not early, you're late.
Yes, and Gutfeld's neurotic. And Juan, sometimes Juan's moody. Let's not let Juan off with like a calm, average guy. Sometimes he comes in and he's okay and he laughs at all our jokes, and sometimes he's angry.
Oh, my gosh.
All right, guys.
Today's in a great mood,
though.
Thanks for the role modeling.
One more thing is up next. You may have noticed the 5 hosts have a variety of personalities, but a new study now says we can narrow them down to just 4 types: average, reserved, self-centered, and role models. Good news, those can change over time, just in case you don't like the one we give you. All right, guys, so we have already known that there are 5 personality traits. Many people have taken this massive questionnaire throughout the course of their lifetime, and they have an idea of where they sit at. Now we have a new study out that has taken those traits and has narrowed people down into 4 main personality types. So I have carefully decided what I think you guys are. Again, not a psychologist. However, for the fun of the show and this study, so for me, I like average. Average tend to be, they're extroverted, but they're a little neurotic, meaning they have their emotional highs and lows. A lot of times people tend to grow out of that. So I think Dana, maybe when she was younger, definitely me, I was average when I was younger, but I have grown into role models, and I think Dana is a role model, which would mean that she is extroverted, openness, agreeable, conscientious, but she's not neurotic anymore. She's a little bit more even keel. Juan, I like Juan to be reserved. He's agreeable, conscientious, and he's also emotionally stable, and that's why I sit next to him. There's no outbursts.
You think he's
it's
emotionally
very
stable?
easy to be with. Greg and Jesse, you guys are tough. You guys are tough.
Careful, Doctor.
I will tell you, I go back and forth between, for Greg, I like average, and I want to go a little bit self-centered. The only reason I say that is you're obviously extroverted. You're not necessarily agreeable, so that goes with self-centered. But I find you a little neurotic with your, a little bit. So therefore, you're between average and self-centered for me. And Jesse, only because it's been being told in my ear that you're self-centered over and over again by the little voice in the microphone.
Yeah, the producer said that I was self-centered in an endearing way.
You know what this is?
That's true.
Do you know what this is? This is like that astrology garbage. Do you know when you go and you see, like, you read your astrological sign, and it goes, oh, you're agreeable, yet you take risks. You're loving, yet you're reserved. And then you realize you read the wrong astrology sign, but you agreed with it. Because they use generic phrases so that you can say, hey, I'm reserved, but I'm also a role model.
That's what a Capricorn would say.
Dana, do you think by me giving you this and saying what I think you are, that would actually, change some of your behaviors or make you to kind of fit
Well, you
into
said
this
I was
box.
a role model, which, according to me, it was like pretty much the best thing you could be on here.
See what I mean?
When you start putting people in a box, so they do say that you can change, but like
Well,
if I put you in a box and you don't like it.
I don't think I'm as extroverted as some people think I am. And I think part of that I have learned, like from people here, especially just going from the government work to in television, that a lot of people are more energized when they go on television and they leave and they're energized, they're so excited. I'm kind of the opposite. I think it takes a lot for me to bring the energy to the show, and then I need to.
Tell me about it.
I know. I mean,
joking.
I know. No, but it's true. I do, and you've helped me with that.
Don't upset her. She's fragile.
No, she said I'm very even-keeled emotionally.
So my reserved one, so my emotionally stable reserve one, do you think that people kind of jump into these different categories throughout the day during different life events, or do you think someone really is kind of born with characteristics and that's just how they stay?
Well, you know, I think people have to adjust, and I think successful people manage it. So if you want to be a leader, I think even if you're an introvert, and I can be very introverted at times, I think you have to understand that when you're in a social group or when you're in a challenge, you have to step up. And so you teach yourself how to do it. So people who are successful at that, it may come across to some as they're extroverts, or what we have here is extraversion. But I think, in fact, they can be learned skills. By the way, I saw in the paper the other day an essay about who doesn't get into college in America. The most discriminated against group, introverts.
And they actually create some of the